With the first week of practice in the books for the Pittsburgh Steelers at training camp, I want to go over the top winners who impressed, but also the pads go on Monday, which means we got to talk about what are the most exciting aspects to expect with full pads on, who's going to be hitting the best. We're going to talk about that here, right on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button in this video if you enjoy it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus episodes whenever we get time to air them. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, I want to go over the people who impressed me the most with the first full week of practice, because I didn't get to talk to you guys Friday evening after Friday's practice or Saturday. So let's go over what we saw there and string it along with the whole first week, which was no full pads. It was just helmets, shorts, shells, or what they call that. Just the not fully padded situation there. I actually wrote about this on SteelersNow.com with Nick Faribault. We broke down who we saw as the top winners and the people that you need to look to see if they can do more to stand out at camp. The first guy who I think everyone agree is probably the biggest winner of training camp right now, and I've already talked about him once during training camp on this show, but it's George Pickens. He's skying up to get passes. He's going down to get passes. He's making guys miss. He's catching passes on the sideline and then turning up from the sideline while in tight coverage to get big yards afterwards. He's just made play after play after play, and it's turning heads, not just with fans, not just with reporters, but also with teammates. I want you to listen to Mitch Trubisky. He talked about him on Saturday. Here's Mitch Trubisky talking about George Pickens.
He's made some great grabs, and George is going to be a really good player. He's just got to keep working.
Did you, I know he missed a lot of the college last season because he was injured, but do you notice guys when they're in college, and then, what's it like to work with those guys afterward?
Yeah, you can't really notice he was even hurt last year. I mean, he's got so much bounce, really great change of direction. But like you said, you're going from a college system to an NFL system, so it's just that learning curve, but he's picking up very quick, and it's just me and him getting on the same page, and me continue to give him opportunities, and he's making plays out here, and he's turning some heads, so it's really good to see.
Mitch's play yesterday was the idea that I meant to go up and get it.
Yeah, definitely. It's just a deep out route, so I put it on the outside. The cornerback tried to jump it, and he didn't get there, and George got really strong hands. He made a great grab, and we expect those type of plays out of him, and he just keeps showing what he can do.
Now, that play that Mitch Trubisky's referencing right there was one of the most impressive plays I've seen George Pickens make. We talked about the deep ball that he made on the first day of training camp practice, but this was a play where he ran that deep out, and Mitch Trubisky threw a good ball. It was to the sideline. And on a traditional play where you're thinking quarterback to receiver, it just would have been a good catch that just beat Ahkello Witherspoon, who dove. He went for the ball, just missed it by a half a second, and the ball got there. And I thought, okay, the play is over. George Pickens got his toe tap and go out of bounds. No, he toe tapped and then accelerated upfield, got a bunch of yards after that. And the only person that tracked him down was Devin Bush, who I think did catch him before he got to the end zone. But George Pickens is phenomenal right now. And Steelers fans, I've said this before. I said this on Steeler Nation Radio when I was talking with our boy Wes Euler and our friend Arthur Moats, both our guys on that show. I'm not saying that George Pickens is definitively that guy already, because we got to see how he does when pads go on. We got to see how healthy he can be. We got to see how he does when it's week to week and every team starts to look for you because you're making plays like that. There's a lot of hurdles he has to get over before we start anointing him to anything. But for a rookie second-round pick, he is having a very good start to training camp. This is as good as you can get in my department when I'm looking at these guys. So George Pickens is living up to the hype, exceeding the hype even. I'm excited to see what he does when the pads go on, because then there won't be any question about, oh, is it live? Would he do that in a real game? Now you're going to start to see him going up against these veteran cornerbacks. And again, he's not abusing the second or third team cornerbacks. He's going up against Witherspoon. He's going up against Wallace. He's going up against Sutton, guys who take on number one receivers all the time in the NFL. I think that's very impressive. The other guys who I listed as the top winners for week one, Mason Rudolph. Now, I want to clarify this because I see a lot of Steelers fans getting really up in arms about this situation because there's some Steelers writers out there that are saying, hey, Mason Rudolph has actually looked the best among the quarterbacks in camp. Nobody, at least from what I've seen from the writers, and I hang out with these people, I talk to these people, I work with these people. I mean, we all look at the same thing. I don't see anyone saying that Mason Rudolph is definitively the starter for the future and the next franchise quarterback and Kenny Pickett's a bum and he'll never be anything. I don't see anyone saying that. But if you are honestly reporting on the situation, you have to acknowledge that Mason Rudolph has been the most successful quarterback in training camp so far. He's completing passes. He's on time. He knows where he's going with the ball. But there's context to things. And I do think that if your problem is, well, there's not enough context to these situations, let me add some for you. Because I'm one to say, I call it like it is. If you watch this show, if you listen to this show, you know me. When someone's doing well, I point it out. When someone's doing poorly, I point it out. I'm doing this for Mason Rudolph right now. Mason is the most on time. But what did I say going into this? What did I say going into this training camp? He knows the system. He's been here, not just with the Steelers organization, but now he's already has a head start on Matt Canada's playbook. This was a big reason why they wanted to keep him, was to set this sort of tone that's like, hey, this is the bare minimum that whenever you do get adjusted to this playbook, whenever you have had several weeks working in this offense, Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky, both new to this offense, this is the bar you have to meet. If you get over that bar, great. You deserve to be a starter. But it's not going to just happen overnight, even for Mitch Trubisky. And there's no doubt that Mason Rudolph benefits by playing the second team defense. He don't got to line up against TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Cam Hayward and Minkah Fitzpatrick, even though he hasn't practiced yet because he's on the non-football related injury list, and Devin Bush and Myles Jack. And we'll get to him in the second segment because he's a big part of this. But Mason Rudolph, he's done what he's supposed to do. And I think it's okay to say, hey, good job, Mason, with what you're supposed to do. Now, if someone does take that and says that he's the definitive starter, there's no doubt about it, that person is speaking a little quick there. I wouldn't buy into what they're selling. But context shows Mitch Trubisky, he's going up against a really talented defense. They're gonna be a lot more on point than an offense that's completely rebuilding. Kenny Pickett, a lot of people were complaining about Kenny Pickett. He played 7 shots over the weekend. He got his first rep in 7 shots and threw a touchdown pass. But in a lot of 11-on-11 reps, he's been struggling. Why? His offensive line is giving up pressure almost as soon as he gets into his backdrop. That's part of the game when you're in the third string quarterback. Your offensive line is not going to be good. It's going to be easier for the third string defensive line to get after you a little bit. And I think he's had to deal with that. But for anyone that's panicking, it's what we talked about with Brooke Pryor of ESPN. She covered the Kansas City Chiefs when Patrick Mahomes was a rookie. She saw firsthand how Patrick Mahomes was struggling as a rookie and throwing like 3, 4, 5 interceptions in a single practice, and how people were like, man, this guy's not what they picked him to be. He's already a bust. It takes time. And this is not saying that he's going to be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or any other quarterback that struggled in their rookie training camp. Nobody's saying all that. We're just saying this is a long process. This is something that you take day by day, and after you've taken day by day for about a month and a half, you then say, all right, what does the data say day by day when you stack up all these days on top of each other? What kind of progress was made? What is the standing of this quarterback battle? That's where it will be. So for Kenny Pickett, for those who are saying like, oh man, he's terrible right now, he'll never get better, calm down. And for those who are saying you need to give him more time, you calm down. Everybody needs to take a chill pill and let these quarterbacks develop the way the Steelers are doing it. They're bringing them on nicely. We'll see how the things go when the pads go on and they get to kind of see how the lines are working in front of them a little bit differently, how the receiving game works a little differently. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about there. Other winners that I listed, Myles Jack, we'll get to him in a sec. DeMonte KZ, he also played well. We'll talk about him. But Connor Hayward also I think has really stepped up at the third tight end position. But I want to focus on the defensive side because there's been some new additions on defense, especially in free agency, who have stood out, and they're starting to set a really good tone, in my opinion, of what the Steelers need from several of their defensive positions. We'll talk about that in just a second here. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Dave. Now, if you don't know about Dave, Dave is one of our great sponsors. They're a banking app that if you've ever needed money in a pinch, they're here to help you, because they don't just help you manage your money, they help you get money with extra cash. It's a function of the Dave banking app that gets you $500 instantly when you sign up for it. That's more money to fill up your tank, buy a wedding gift, catch up on bills, all the things you need whenever you're in a pinch. You can finally tackle those expenses that you've been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest or credit check needed. Millions of people are already downloading the Dave app today, and they get the financial relief they need from extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave right now and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Again, that app is called Dave, D-A-V-E, Dave. And you can find it in the App Store. That's D-A-V-E, Dave. Sign up for extra cash and account right now and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and the conditions, go to dave.com/legal. That's dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Bank provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're going back over how people have looked so far in training camp. And I alluded to Myles Jack was someone I wanted to talk about because I tweeted this. He's looked really good in coverage. He's looked like he's in the right spot almost all the time. He's challenging passes, even when he's been occasionally beat. There was one amazing catch Zach Gentry had, I believe it was Friday, when Mitch Trubisky threw a pass. And I mean, like Myles Jack, his hand was here, the ball went right here, and Zach Gentry caught it perfectly. And it was great coverage, just a better throw and catch. But he has challenged so many things. I like the way he's approaching things. I want to talk to him after one of the practices, asking him about Brian Flores and Devin Bush, because what I often see is, if you haven't been to Steelers practice, you haven't got a chance to see this, but this is how it kind of usually works. After the defense has done a full team session, you see the team kind of doing their thing. After most team sessions, there's the switch to special teams. So Danny Smith comes on, he's testing all the field goal block, field goal kick, punt return, all those type of things. They're testing all those things, or installing those into the special teams unit. Oftentimes, you'll see Brian Flores take Devin Bush, Myles Jack, and just walk off somewhere, and they'll just go somewhere and talk. And you don't know what they're talking about, but you can assume it's something about football. I wanted to ask Myles Jack about it. He gave me some interesting info. Here's Myles Jack talking about those meetups and what he's seeing at training camp.
Like Brian Flores, he takes you and Devin off, and y'all have a personal talk.
Yeah.
What y'all talk about in those moments?
We're just working on little intangibles. He's big on the details, and that's kind of the main things we're working on these days in camp. Just getting the details down so that way we can move to more advanced things. But we can't move on until we get to the more, like, just kind of tightening up the details, just the basic things of the playbook. But it's fun. We'll work the bag, we'll work the sled, we'll just talk about what we got coming up. Yeah, it's great.
How close are you to Devin getting, just like as far as like how much time you spend together,
yeah,
what kind of stuff?
I mean, me and him we're not roommates because it's kind of like a suite, but
right.
We see
but
each
you're in
other.
the same suite, though.
We're in the same suite, kicking it and everything. So yeah, it's great actually getting to spend the time, get to know him, talking on the field, going through, because we're here all day. So
right.
It's really cool. I think it's a great experience. I think in Jacksonville, we wasn't really going away in camps. So you didn't really get to spend that time with your teammates. Here, you really get that time with your teammates. So it's great.
So I think it's really interesting to hear Myles Jack there talk about the experience that they're getting at St. Vincent. We'll get into the Brian Flores second in a part again, but this is part of why Mike Tomlin emphasizes St. Vincent College. It's out in Latrobe. If you're not from Pitt, if you're just a Steelers fan and you haven't been to Pittsburgh in a long time, or you've never been to St. Vincent College, it's an hour away from the city. Like, I live in the city of Pittsburgh. I'm recording right now in the east end of Pittsburgh. It takes me an hour to get there from there. And when you go out there, there's a couple places, like there's Sharky's, Dino's, and a few places that you can go to eat and drink and whatever, do what you want there. But it's not like Pittsburgh, where like literally I could walk somewhere in 5 minutes from my house right now and get some food, get some drink, and have a lot of places around me and things to do all the time. It isolates you. It forces you to say, hey, you know what? What are my teammates up to? What are we doing? We're going to focus on that. And that gives these guys a chance to kind of do that specifically about football. And I've heard guys, I asked Cam Sutton about it. He says, like, one thing that him and even Minkah Fitzpatrick, while he's hurt right now, he said they're going over film. He's like, they're going over practice footage that they get, and they're saying, hey, this is what we need to do here. This is what we need to do here. Those are good things. And for Myles Jack and Devin Bush, Steelers fans, you want those two to be extremely close, because if they can be really close on and off the field, I think it only helps your chance to have a truly great defense this year. And I still say that is the biggest key to this team being really competitive in the NFL. But back to what Myles Jack was saying about Brian Flores and Devin Bush. Again, Myles Jack, every time I've talked to him, he says attention to detail. Brian Flores does not let him nor Devin Bush off the hook if they're some of the times right, most of the times right. They have to be doing the exact thing that they are assigned to do. And the fact that I think you have Brian Flores taking you off to the side, going over those minute details, and knows how to relate it to the bigger details of the game, because again, that's what head coaches do, but you have a person doing that at the position. I think that's just going to go such a long way to what the Steelers need from their linebackers and fixing the problem that they've had there. And let's be real, the Steelers have had some terrible luck at linebacker over the past few years. It goes all the way back to 2017 when Ryan Shazier was on his pace to be like the best linebacker the Steelers have seen in decades. And then he gets paralyzed, and his career ends in the saddest of ways. Then you trade up, you go get Devin Bush. He has a very strong rookie season, starting to have a really strong second season, tears his ACL, messes up his second season, third season, not good at all. Now he's in his fourth year, and he kind of has to prove himself. But he's hungry. He wants to prove himself. I think that's the good thing here, that if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're like, hey, we got something going for us. Now you got him and Myles Jack, two athletic linebackers who can go sideline to sideline, tackle to tackle, who can help in coverage while also addressing the run. I am very excited to see how these guys do when the pads go on, not just with backs on backers, like who do they take on? Do we see Myles Jack versus Najee Harris? Do we see Devin Bush versus Najee Harris? Those things like that. No. I'm simply talking about just seeing these guys in 11 on 11. How do they fill the hole? Because I'll tell you right now, with the pads off, it is very difficult to gauge, especially in the trenches, who is great. I mean, there's certain guys like TJ where it's like, obviously, okay, he's just bullying people. Like, it's just not fun anymore. Like, stop it, TJ. Come on, give him a break. But then there's other situations where, like, you see Najee Harris run this run, or Anthony McFarland breaks this off, or Benny Snell breaks this off, and you're like, man, would they have done that if it was live football? Because then their opponents would have been going full speed, or are their offense not going enough full speed? All those questions will be thrown out the window, because I do think that when you see these guys put the pads on, Myles Jack, Devin Bush, they're going to be aggressive. The team needs them to be aggressive, but also be accountable. And I think that's another thing that you hear from Myles Jack. Brian Flores beating in their ear, that's not going to stop in training camp. That's going to continue all season long. When they're coming off the field, when they're saying, hey, what do we do right? What do we do wrong? You're going to have a former NFL head coach who is strictly about the attention to details, addressing them and helping them out. I think that plays a major role into what they're trying to do. But again, we got to see what happens when the pads go on. We'll find that out Monday, because they're going to put the pads on for the first time, the full pads on for the first time Monday. There's a specific group, though, that I think needs to show more than anyone else with those pads on. You could probably guess who I'm talking about. It's the offensive line. I talked to James Daniels, Mason Cole, and a few other guys about the offensive line, but I want to focus on something that James Daniels brought up, because I think there's some optimism from him about how this group will look once the pads go on and they can play fully live football. We'll do that in just a sec here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's Major League Baseball season, which is well underway. And if you want to put prop bets down on the NFL season, the NBA, NHL, all the different places with pro sports that are right around the corner, go to betonline.net. They'll teach you all the ends, all the odds, all the bets that you can make that can help you make the most money out of your watching sports activities. Again, BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information. You can find live betting, playoffs, esports, and more available on their website. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here wanting to talk about this. Now, I wrote about this for SteelersNow.com as well over the weekend. It was a piece where I wanted to highlight the offensive line at least a little bit before the pads went on. I didn't want to do it too much because, to me, the offense and defensive lines, there's certain things like DeMarvin Leal, his hand placement I thought was really good, but you can't see all of those trench fights really without pads on. And I wrote about how James Daniels and Mason Cole feel that the Steelers' offensive line is ready to show their own skills. I really think there's something that these guys have a quiet confidence that they're about to catch some people off guard about something. But I want you to hear from James Daniels when I was asking him what improvements have been made. He did get in a little bit of stuff there that I think that sounded interesting, that he says, hey, like, my teammates around me, they are taking steps forward. Here's James Daniels when I asked him about this on Saturday.
So, James, a lot of people have been still looking at you like you're the leader of the offensive line. You guys haven't put pads on yet, but how have you seen the guys working through your steps and as you guys have gotten closer out here?
I can tell everyone did a lot of work during the break, just seeing like the technique and how people look now compared to how we looked during minicamp. The guys did a really good job of like working their technique during the break.
What kind of stuff did you do during the break?
Same. I worked out, did some technique work, conditioned, and just chilled out. So, of course, like I did work, but I also was enjoying my time off as well.
No, of course. What's the feeling like with pads going on Monday?
It's exciting. It's always like we play, especially linemen. We play so much is predicated on like how it is like when we put pads on, like we're actually able to like stick our shoulders in. We're actually able to come off the ball. So it's pretty exciting that the pads are coming on Monday.
There is an excitement there, and you can hear it from James Daniels. Mason Cole said the same thing. Even the running back, I talked to Benny Snell, and he's like, I can't wait for the pads to get on so we can finally see what's going on with this run game. There's an excitement there. And yes, there's parts of the game that the defense have to be careful about because they can't go all out either. But for the offensive line, I don't think y'all realize, if you've never played on the offensive line, you don't realize how much the shoulder pads are actually a thing that helps them, not just with their shoulder pads, but the opponent's shoulder pads. It gives them a clear target to say, hey, if I get control of the center of their chest, I control this battle. I win here. And when you look at what the Steelers kind of do, like if you looked at the Steelers offensive line, they've been getting their butt kicked by the Steelers defensive line. But again, that's what's going to happen when you have a defensive line with Cam Hayward and Tyson. He hasn't practiced, but you have him, Chris Wormley, Larry Ogunjobi still warming up. And then TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are your edge rushers. Like, there's so much going on there. It's tough for an offensive line. It's still trying to gel and come together to actually come together. That's going to be a battle. But they get this offensive line is I think is in the position to say, hey, if you come off on the right foot together, if you can be physical but coordinated and physical, it puts you in that conversation of being a much better offensive line than what people assumed you could be heading into the season. Because a lot of people have written the offensive line off. Oh, they're just going to be bad. They're just not going to put it together. They're just, whoever's quarterback, they're going to be running for their life every single play. And hey, maybe they will be bad. But I think that right now, James Daniels, solid addition. Mason Cole, good addition. And I guess I should say solid, flip those, because in my opinion, James Daniels' addition is a good deal better than Mason Cole's. But the two of them are NFC North veterans who've come to the AFC North now and are ready to play. And they're ready to sort of up the communication standards that weren't there last year for this young offensive line. Because remember, one of my biggest things that I said every week when I was looking at Kendrick Green, I'm like, man, this dude looks lost. He was trying to communicate. He was trying to see what was coming, recognize it, think for himself, okay, this is what I got to do. Then I got to call it. Okay, let me call it what these guys are trying to do. That just wasn't happening with Kendrick Green last year. The center position is hard. It's not just something you walk into and experience all the success in the world. So that being said, Mason Cole, from what I understand, is communicating at a good level. That's getting through to players. It's getting through to coaches. And I think that is the path that you want to see him on. But specifically with James Daniels, specifically with with this offensive line. Dan Moore Jr., again, we don't know who's the starting left guard. Kevin Dotson, Kendrick Green, Jakuma Core, Mason Cole, those groups. I'm intrigued to see how this offensive line plays against this defensive front when the pads are on. They don't have to hold back. They have an actual target to strike. Because again, when those shoulder pads are on, it's a bigger target. When you have a chance to punch up into those pads and get a grip on them without getting a holding penalty, it changes everything about it. And also, you can go 100% full strength. This is the whole iron sharpens iron thing that Mike Tomlin talks about. And I've said, I've kind of hinted at this before. I want to say this fully. I truly believe that if this offensive line could go up against this defensive front in full pads and come out on the other side feeling good about themselves and having played well, I think it says a lot about the progress that they've made, because everyone was knowing coming into the season, like, man, offensive line is an issue. Some people were saying draft an offensive lineman in the first round and the second round. Just rebuild entirely. The Steelers aren't doing that. They're taking their time. They're seeing who they got. And they're going to try to see who they got with this offensive line. And I think James Daniels talking about it there kind of reminded me, like, you know what? Yeah, he's new to this team, but he's not new to the game. And he knows what's expected of the game. So as the pads go on, you're going to have a lot of fun watching backs on backers. You're going to have a lot of fun watching the 11-on-11 drills. But watch the trench fights. Watch who's winning in the interior. Watch who's winning on the edge. To me, those could be the things that determine a lot about how the Steelers run this season, the foundation that they're even build upon. I think that the offensive line, if they can come out victorious on a few more of those reps, I think that the offensive line is going to come out more victorious on a lot higher of a clip against the rest of the NFL. That being said, we got to draw today to a close. But I want to remind people, get the same things at college if you're out in the Pittsburgh area. If you're not and you're making your way, hope to see you soon. Just a heads up, I won't be at practice on Monday. I will be there Tuesday. So I will be getting you guys all the information and all the talk from people who are there, relaying on this show, talking about other things that we haven't discussed just yet. I still have other player interviews I want to get to. Can't get to all of them right away, but we hope that you're enjoying the show and the talks that we're having with players on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster and what they're saying so far, because I do think it's valuable to hear what they say and evaluate, okay, this is what they're talking about from what we're seeing in practice. So again, thanks for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. If you want to check out more of this show, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. Thanks again for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back on your screens, in your ears Tuesday.